So in the last video, we provided an overview of the business model canvas. Today, we tackle the first section of the canvas, customer segments. Hi, I'm Steve Morris, and I use this StartupSOS channel to provide practical advice to first-time entrepreneurs. And today, our topic, customer segments. So what is a customer segment? Well, customer segments are simply ways to organize your customers into different groupings. Different groupings based on the idea that they have a slightly different need, or possibly they need to be reached through a different channel for both marketing to create awareness and to create leads, and maybe a different channel for sales to actually collect orders. Now, when it comes to different needs, we have a very simple example in a previous video, the milkshake example. There's a link to it up here that does a very simple, very effective job of describing customer segments and how different segments in something as simple as a milkshake market, different customer segments can have very different needs that result in different feature requirements and certainly different messaging requirements on the marketing side. And that's what makes customer segments so important for a startup. Realistically, when you're an early stage startup, you have very few resources. You cannot send marketing branding messages to a bunch of different segments or you're going to confuse the market. You just don't have a big enough budget. So it generally makes sense to really focus in on one customer segment so you can really focus in on the features exactly for that segment and really focusing your messaging in on that segment and focus your sales channel in on exactly that segment. Nail that segment and then go after the next segment and the next segment. So the idea is focus on a first segment, but over time you'll address more. So over time you're addressing a big market, which is certainly what investors want to hear. But most smart investors want to hear that initially you are laser focused on a first segment instead of trying to boil the ocean and be everything to everybody, which is pretty tough for a startup to do. So the overall moral of that story is it's a really good idea to choose one segment as your first segment to focus on. So that's part of the challenge in filling out that first segment of the canvas is to list the different customer segments in your market, the segments you'll eventually be addressing, and then choose the one that you want to address first, because frankly, the rest of the canvas, the value proposition in particular, will depend on focusing on that one segment. So you'll want to choose one. Unfortunately, customer segment is even a little more complicated for a lot of entrepreneurs because you can also have a multi-sided market. What does multi-sided market mean? Well, it means that you're addressing two or more fundamentally different kinds of customers. So, simple example, a social media play, let's say a Facebook. There's at least two sides to that market. On the one hand are the users that are using the social media site, Facebook users, who aren't paying anything but have to get value out of the site to show up at the site in order for the second part of the business model to work, the second customer segment, which is advertisers, the ones who actually are paying the revenue to Facebook. So you have advertisers who pay and users who don't pay but need to be offered the value that they're seeking on the site. Two very different kinds of customers. Now, that's just a two-sided market. Think of something like a grocery store. Boy, you could be selling through a wholesaler to distributors, to a whole chain of stores, down to an individual store, and then finally to the customer. Wow, that's maybe a five-sided market at least. So markets can get pretty complicated. The challenge is you need to be worried about every side of those multi-sided markets. If you're Facebook, you have to provide the right value to both the advertisers and to the users. Likewise, when you're selling a food product through a grocery chain, you need to be aware of the value proposition at each stage in that value chain because everybody needs to get a win through the process. So not only do you need to understand customer segments and choose one to focus on, but you need to understand how many sides does your market have. And my suggestion is develop a canvas, a business model canvas for each side of your market, because each side of your market really is an entirely different value proposition. So your action steps for filling out your canvas. Take a look at the market segments in your market. Identify what they are, how big they are, and decide which one will you focus on first. Now, how do you decide? Well, to a great extent, there's no wrong answer. Choosing one is better than not choosing. You might choose one because it's easier to reach through a distribution channel you have access to, or one that requires a simpler version of the product that you can get to market first. Or maybe there's a segment of your market that has a more compelling need. It's customers that are going to buy faster. Maybe you address that one first. So there are a lot of different rationales you can have for choosing which segment, but my suggestion is choose one. And once you've identified the segments, chosen one segment, then ask that question: is this really a multi-sided market? Are there different types of customers that you have to deal with? And if so, start developing a canvas for each side of the market. That wraps up this discussion of customer segments. Any questions, please leave a comment. Would love to try to answer questions you have. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that down in the corner. And if this is helpful, please like it and share it. And stay tuned, because this is just the first segment of 9. We have a lot more coming up in this playlist, and a link to the playlist is right below here. That's it for today. Thank you very much for watching.